Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. The other point of this case that I think is interesting and worth bringing up is President Trump's deposition. He did not testify in court, but there were pieces of that deposition played. And he was classic Donald Trump. He was belligerent with the opposing lawyer, telling the opposing lawyer that Justice E. Jean Carroll wasn't his type, the lawyer wasn't his type. He was asked about his comments on the infamous Access Hollywood tape. This came out right before the 2016 election, and he seemed to defend or justify the comments that he had made. Listen to this.
In this video, I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. Just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Grab them by the you can do anything. That's what you said, correct?
Well, historically, that's true with stars.
It's true with stars that they can grab women by the
Well, that's what it's. If you look over the last million years, I guess that's been largely true. Not always, but largely true. Unfortunately or fortunately.
And you consider yourself to be a star?
I think you can say that, yeah.
Kate, I just imagine trying to prepare Donald Trump for this deposition and then watching it unfold. I mean, if he had showed a little restraint, a little regret for having spoken in such crude fashion, that might have put some doubt into the jury's mind. But instead, classic Trump, I mean, he simply can't help himself, even when it is in his own clear legal interest to do so. And that may be part of what has contributed now to this reputational hit and this $5 million verdict against him.
Right, Kyle. I mean, I think you said it best yourself that it is classic Trump. If Trump had shown a little more restraint, he might have won the election against Joe Biden. But he was not able to do that, even though he was an incumbent. He could point to some real victories on tax reform, on judges. And as you remember as well as I do, that is not the campaign that he ran. And everything descended into chaos, especially after the election. So this is consistent with what we know about Trump's character, is that he's not able to show restraint, and he continued to defend those indefensible comments, which is really regrettable. I do think this is one more reason, watching that deposition, that Republicans should really think long and hard about making him their nominee again, because if he did manage somehow to get a second term, who would be willing to work for him? What would his policies be? It would be so much grievance of the 2020 election, of the 2016 election, and the FBI. How much of that are voters willing to tolerate, or do they want a nominee who is going to move the party forward? There is kind of a conventional wisdom that this finding will help Trump, as many other kind of attacks against him have had in the past, but I'm really not so sure, Kyle. Trump is not novel anymore. He's not running against Hillary Clinton. The press in some quarters is sort of cheering him on because they think he'd be the easiest for Biden to beat. It's a different scenario than 2016. And so hopefully that deposition, Republicans watch it and have pause about whether this person is really who they want to be their standard bearer going forward.
And I suppose that the answer to the question of how this affects the election depends in part on what Trump says next. He is up for a big CNN town hall today, and no doubt he will be asked about this. It's anyone's guess what he will say. But Kim, other Republicans seem to be grasping for a way to respond to this verdict. Mike Pence was asked by NBC News. He said, "It's just one more story focusing on my former running mate that I know is a great fascination to members of the national media, but I just don't think it's where the American people are focused." One more reaction from Texas Republican Senator John Cornyn. He said he wasn't sure the verdict would affect the 2024 candidacy, but he added, "The fact is, I do not think he could win the presidency," unquote. And Kim, what's your take on how President Trump's Republican rivals, particularly as we go into these debates that are now going to begin in just a couple months, should approach these issues? And I suppose not even just the E. Jean Carroll case, but the case brought by Alvin Bragg in New York, the case that's pending in Georgia against President Trump for trying to overturn the Georgia election in 2020. And then the federal case from Jack Smith is probably aimed at this retention of classified documents, though who knows where else Jack Smith, the special prosecutor there, may be going.
The candidate that I thought actually handled this best, just in the pure sense of politics, was actually Vivek Ramaswamy, who came out, and this was his statement. I'll read it. He said, "Believe me, it would be a lot easier if Trump weren't in this race. But in this country, we don't weaponize the law or use decades old allegations to undercut opponents." End quote. So what he was essentially doing there was saying, I think that there's some doubt about these claims. I think that this is part of, as Kate was saying, an ongoing systematic attack on Donald Trump. This was unfortunately something that got wrapped up in the courts, which is happening more and more. That all being said, look, people, with Donald Trump comes this kind of constant drama. And that to me is going to be the smart move for people who are running against Trump in the primary. Because the other way you can do this is what Republican Asa Hutchinson did. And he's a former GOP governor who's also now in the Republican race, which was to take a very firm stance and say, tell Americans that they had to take this jury verdict seriously, that it was yet another example of Donald Trump's indefensible behavior. When you do that, you're going to outrage a lot of people who are looking at, again, this long train of attacks on Trump and make them feel as though they need to defend him. And I think the alternate route is that you get some candidates out there, especially ones that have some really good ideas or have some real experience or have some real accomplishments that they can tout. They show some fight and some spirit, the thing that a lot of Republican voters like about Donald Trump. So they give people an alternative, somebody that they could really support, whose ideas they like and whose character they trust. And then they remind them, if you go down the Trump road, we're going to be really focused all the time on all the accusations and the investigations and everything. And that's going to get in the way of a Republican agenda. And you're going to be better off choosing somebody else. Okay, we'll see if there are any candidates who are able to do that. But they're going to have to be very good at it because there are some people that in the party, an unsizable number, who remain very committed to Donald Trump. Are there increasing concerns about him and his ability to win the general election? Yes, I think there are. But again, you're going to have someone who doesn't necessarily force them to disavow the former president, to condemn the former president, but rather to feel as though they have a better alternative that's going to get the party to a better place.
Kate, we'll give you the last word, but what about Governor Ron DeSantis down in Florida? He has been able to sidestep some of these questions so far because he is not an announced candidate for office. But the news this week is that he is starting to begin the process of shifting some money around. He has millions of dollars in a state political account, and the Politico story this week is that he has severed his connections to that account, which will allow him to begin shifting that money toward federal committees. Ron DeSantis so far has been pegged in the media as mostly a culture warrior, but it looks to me like he has racked up a pretty impressive record here in his state's most recent legislative session, working on stuff like concealed carry and school choice. And it suggests to me that he is aiming to broaden his message. And once he announces, burst out of the gate here as the candidate who says, look at my record, look at what we passed in Florida this year. I'm the guy who knows how to get things done.
Yeah, Kyle, Ron DeSantis seems to be running, and I'm not sure I need any bank statements to believe it. But in his position, I think you're right that he does need to broaden his pitch a little bit. He has been very focused on those distinct culture war issues, Disney being one of them. However, I would make sort of an argument that those things are tied up in one sense. We talked on the podcast earlier this week about the poll showing Biden in real trouble with a 37% approval rating. In that poll, the voters said that they preferred Trump on the economy to Biden by a pretty broad margin. And if I'm looking at that poll, I think that there is a lane for someone who can make the connection between stagnant living standards and the public's mood and the public's willingness to take a new job, have children. Those issues are really profoundly tied up with rising living standards. And someone who was able to make that case and show the kind of core economic results that I think DeSantis can point to if he makes that case, I think that could be a potent political mix for somebody. And let's see if he can do it.
Thank you, Kate and Kim. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.